my future self, I am in pain, and I went to the grocery store to get stuff to make an Italian chocolate meringue cake because last week I tried to make this experiment in taro boba pudding out of the Chinese cookbook, and let me tell you, it did not turn out great. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't like, yes. So I'm going back to what I know, just fancy cakes. Just, to cleanse myself of the experience of making 2 bad desserts in a row. Or at least meh desserts in a row. Cake is happening. Okay, first of all, making cake batter. Chocolate cake batter. The best kind of cake batter. And yes, I weigh everything. I'm not gonna do it the American way. All the cake batter gets chucked in the sheet pan. First step is done. My oven is a little behind, so I have to wait for it to preheat. I'm realizing that heavy apron is like a whole mood. I like this. I don't want to wear a binder, but I want to look flat chested. And not actually flat chested, but I like it. Pastry cream. This is a sort of vanilla pudding-esque kind of goop that you slather between the cake layers. Do not do this. This is a mistake. The recipe does call for unwhipped heavy cream to be added to the pastry cream, but it makes it way too thin, and it would have been way better without it. If you do want to use heavy cream, whip it first, then fold it in. Okay, now Italian buttercream, chocolate, Italian buttercream. We have to have a double boiler in which you put the egg whites and the sugar. You slowly warm them. You slowly whisk them until they reach the appropriate temperature, and then you take them over to your electric whisker because this shit is tiring on the arms. Okay, so we take it over here, we slot it in. Yes! Look at that. It's beautiful. Look at that. Oh my god, I want to lick it off the screen. This is my grandmother's cake plate. I love this thing dearly, and I use it for all my cakes. So let's do some cake building while we chat. So, because I failed, maybe not spectacularly, but still failed at both of my attempts at Chinese desserts, I thought we should talk about food. I was reading a white paper recently on the feminization of baking in food industry. And I read a line I thought applied to our little Italian cooking endeavor that we have here in front of us. The History of Gourmet magazine explains how traditional ways of cooking deemed important were established for the wealthy and privileged, creating the industry's prejudice in favor of all things French and Italian, which is neither natural or inevitable, but instead historically determined. The likelihood that you've gotten all the way to this video in your life and never thought about white supremacy in food is probably very low. This history reveals attitudes towards classical French cooking by analyzing the rhetoric used by critics separating home cooking from the technical, scientific, and artistic skills associated with elite chefs or professionals. And obviously, I am not a professional. Centuries later, the association of cooking with women's domestic roles creates a feminization threat that male chefs still experience, leading to the exclusion of women in kitchens. Examples of other male-dominated occupations becoming female-dominated, such as elementary school teaching, actually did show a decrease in pay, which explains male chefs' concerns. If their jobs are associated with femininity, they will be devalued by society. Okay, so we got our white supremacy, we got our anti-femininity, and if you were listening closely, we even snuck in a little bit of classism, because of course this paper is about the sophistication of haute cuisine, fancy food for fancy rich people. But like, why am I bringing this up in relationship to my own personal cooking? Well, I'm non-binary. I use they, them pronouns. And I had to renegotiate my relationship to cooking as my understanding of my own gender evolved. But I've also had to renegotiate my relationship to my own cooking expertise. When I fail at Chinese dishes, I am excited. Well, yes, in this video, I'm falling back on an old standard to re-prove to myself that those skills still exist. It's in an attempt to rebuild my confidence so that I can reach out again and to try again to gain food skills from cultures that I did not grow up in association with. Now, I should take a brief moment here to say that I didn't really grow up with any food culture at all, unless you can call steamed chicken breasts and unsalted broccoli a food culture. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. But white people taco night is not exactly a food culture. And learning to love foods from other cultures, learning to love flavors and textures without claiming them as my flavors and textures has been like a really hard road. And fortunately for me, I live with a partner who's a great cook and very adventurous and very willing to eat anything and try anything. And I've really benefited from that. But, and here is where classism sneaks back in. I own a handmade donabe, a traditional ceramic rice cooking pot. I own a handmade ongi, a traditional ceramic kimchi making pot. I have the space and time and resources to own the equipment, learn how to use it, seek out the ingredients, and use them in recipes that might fail with no regard for the wasting of those ingredients. I can always get more. I know, I've popped a few peas in this episode of trying to do voiceover. I'm doing my best, using a new shotgun. I'm sitting a little farther away now. Let's see how this works. This, by the way, is all the leftover cake that I cut the circles out of, smooshed up into a bowl mixed with coconut and milk powder and pastry cream, and we're gonna roll them up into balls, roll those balls into even more coconut. Then after we frost the cake, we're gonna use the cake balls as decoration. It also gives you a really convenient slicing guide when you are cutting a slice of cake. Or if you want to just snack some cake out of the refrigerator, you can just sneak one of the balls off the side of the cake. Highly recommended. Okay, we were talking about real serious stuff. So all this stuff: gender, race, geographic region of origin, class, expertise, skill levels of doing certain kinds of things, access to ingredients, and space and time, all combined into today's mascot, food privilege. Did I pop my pee that time? How'd I do? And I want to point out food privilege as being slightly different than other kinds of privilege when it comes to intersectionality. When Crenshaw coined the term, it was specifically to point out the positionality of Black women, of Black queer women, of people who fall at these complex intersections of different kind of marginalization. And the reason I wanted to talk about my intersectionality and how they transform themselves together into something that you could call food privilege is that food privilege doesn't have a clear-cut antithesis. The concept of food privilege takes intersectionality to the extreme. You may live in a food desert, but have access to your cultural foods. You may live in a Trader Joe's neighborhood, but have no access to a grocery store that sells the ingredients traditional to your culture. You may have access and means to acquire ingredients without the hand skills required to transform those ingredients into food that you love. You may have a body which others deem too fat or too skinny, making it harder to feed yourself in the face of those expectations. I'm interested in food, not just because of the full sensory experience of creating and consuming it, but also what it says about our relationships to our bodies, each other, and the environment. It's kind of like a gateway drug, but to giving a shit about other human beings.